That was tonight. It was nearly 10:45 p.m. I just returned from a brutal site visit 2 towns over, design adjustments, contractor ego stroking, and a last-minute safety concern that had me crawling under steel beams like I was 30 again. My back ached. My brain hummed. All I wanted was a glass of bourbon and the quiet hum of late-night television. Familiar, easy things. Instead, I stood at the front door, listening. Laughter. Claire's laughter. But not the kind I remembered. The soft, involuntary kind that used to melt me in an instant. This was high-pitched, too sharp, forced, like the kind people use when they're playing a role they haven't fully earned. I didn't move. Just stood there, one hand still on the doorknob, the other tightening instinctively around the strap of my leather satchel. I wasn't supposed to be home yet. I told Claire the visit might run until midnight, maybe later. Still holding my breath, I unlocked the door. The smell of wine hit me first, red, bold, expensive. Not the boxed kind Claire used to stash in the fridge when she'd binge reality TV and wear my hoodie. The good stuff. 3 glasses sat on the coffee table, half full, lipstick stained. A 4th, empty, stood abandoned on the kitchen counter, as if someone decided they didn't need to play host anymore. Claire didn't notice me. None of them did. I heard her voice before I saw her. "You have to choose yourself, Claire," someone said. Probably Melissa or Tamron, her new girls' night friends. Their voices were honey-laced poison. "You've spent so long making his dreams work. Now it's time for yours." Another voice chimed in, more masculine. "Jason." That name stuck like a needle behind my eye. Jason, of all people. An old classmate of ours. Used to be one of the guys I trusted. Now his voice curled around my wife's name like it had a right to be there. "I'm just saying," he said, casual, cocky. "He'll understand eventually. They always do. Or they don't. Either way, that's not your responsibility." Laughter followed. Harsh. Mean. Unfamiliar in this house where I used to fall asleep to soft music and the low hum of Claire whispering book reviews into her phone for her podcast. I stepped out of view, lingering in the shadow of the hallway. There was something about hearing your own life being dissected by strangers in your home that carves into you deeper than betrayal ever could. The intimacy of it. The gall. The certainty in their voices, like they already knew how I'd respond. Like I was just a prop in a narrative they'd been rehearsing. "You've outgrown him," one of the women said. "He's still living that whole, I'm an architect dream like it's sexy or something." Laughter again. I had to force my hands not to clench. "I mean," she added, "he is kind of hot, in that dadcore, tall drinks water slowly kind of way." A pause. Then Claire. "Please stop. I'm serious. He's still a good man. Just not my man anymore." That landed harder than I expected. She said it with a kind of cold finality I didn't recognize, like she'd practiced it. Probably had. Still, I stayed in the hallway. Shoes were piled by the door. For pairs I didn't recognize, and one, Jason's, that still had mud on the soles. I could see the trail faintly on the hardwood. Claire would have killed me if I tracked in dirt like that. They weren't even trying to hide the plan anymore. It was unfolding in front of me like an off-Broadway performance. Full cast, rehearsed lines, ready for the finale. And I was the audience. I leaned against the wall and let it all wash over me. The words, the laughter, the plans they were crafting right there in our living room while sipping expensive Cabernet and pretending my life wasn't about to implode. The worst part? I didn't feel rage. Not yet. What I felt was clarity. And maybe something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time, relief. Because if this was the moment where it all finally broke, then maybe, just maybe, I could stop holding it together by myself. Claire had checked out long before this night. I saw it in the way she flinched when I touched her shoulder, in how she introduced me to her friends as just an architect, instead of mentioning the firm I built from scratch. She used to call me her builder, of houses, of futures. Lately, I was just background noise. So I stayed in the hallway, my heartbeat strangely steady. I wasn't going to burst in. I wasn't going to make a scene. Let them play their little act. Let the script unfold. I was already rewriting mine. And when the storm broke, I wasn't going to be the one drowning. From the edge of the kitchen, I could see the play unfolding with unnerving precision. Claire sat on the love seat now, angled to face her 2 closest friends, Tamron and Melissa, who perched on the sofa with oversized glasses of red wine like they were judges on a reality show. Jason sat in the club chair, my chair, like it was his throne, legs crossed, sipping from a tumbler of bourbon that wasn't his. I didn't need to be seen. I just listened. Tamron was talking, her tone the same one she used at charity events when she wanted to sound enlightened. You're doing the brave thing, Claire. Most women would settle. But not you. Claire nodded slowly, like she'd been coached to hold her chin a certain way, to blink less, to seem sure. I've given him so much of my time, my energy, and I don't want to feel like a passenger anymore. Passenger. That word echoed. I was the one who built this house. Laid out its bones on a sketch pad over wine and Thai takeout. She chose the wall colors. I chose the foundation. Passenger? She'd forgotten who drove this life. Jason cleared his throat. He always did that before he wanted the room's attention. He'll take it hard at first, but eventually, he'll thank you for your honesty. He smirked around the rim of his glass. They always do. I poured myself a glass of water, keeping my footsteps quiet. The ice clinked. Nobody heard. Melissa chimed in, voice syrupy. He's a good man, sure, but good men don't always see what's in front of them. They expect us to carry the emotional weight. You've carried it long enough. Emotional weight. That made me snort quietly. She meant the same man who remembered Claire's parents' anniversary when she forgot. The man who brought her tea when her cramps kept her in bed, who canceled meetings to walk her through panic attacks in parking lots, who rubbed her back through 2 miscarriages without needing anything in return. That's what they called not seeing her. But I didn't feel angry. Not yet. I felt still. They thought they were building her up. But I could see it plain as steel on blueprint paper. They were preparing for a performance. This wasn't a spontaneous outpouring. This was staged. Crafted. Claire even had her lines rehearsed. I could hear her whispering them under her breath when the others weren't looking. I need to choose myself. This marriage doesn't align with who I'm becoming. He'll understand, eventually. They weren't even hiding it. Jason, for all his smug silence, was watching Claire like a stage manager. Like he'd already read this script and was waiting for the applause. His leg bounced just once. A nervous tick I remembered from back in college when he used to pitch ideas in group projects and wait to see if everyone would nod. But I wasn't going to give them what they came for. They were expecting desperation, confusion, anger. A scene. Instead, I leaned against the granite counter and stared out the kitchen window into the dark backyard, where the patio lights flickered on with motion. Somewhere out there was the bench I built by hand. Claire used to sit there with coffee and say it made her feel safe. Now she wanted to choose herself. Jason's voice floated through again, low and rich. By the time you say it, Claire, just make sure you're firm. Don't let him reel you back in. They always try. He'll beg. They always beg. Tamara nodded like she was testifying in court. It's never easy, but you'll feel lighter after. I promise. I sipped my water. It tasted like nothing. Like silence. So this was the plan. Claire would walk in, deliver her speech, and I'd fall to pieces. I'd cry. I'd ask her why. I'd tell her I could change. And they'd all console her, whisper how brave she was, how she deserved more. They probably even planned to stay the night, like emotional bodyguards, keeping me from pulling her back into my gravitational pull. Except I wasn't falling apart. I was waking up. All those team nights she said she had, the constant text buzzes with the phone face down, the sudden interest in personal development podcasts and finding herself. I'd noticed. I just hadn't wanted to admit what they meant. Now I didn't have to guess. She was staging an ending. And endings are something I understand. As an architect, you don't just demolish something. You deconstruct. You study the structure. You identify the load-bearing walls. You decide what can be saved and what needs to come down. I looked at my reflection in the oven glass. Tired eyes, salt and pepper stubble, shirt wrinkled from the long drive. I didn't look broken. I looked done. The voices got quieter. Claire was standing now. I could hear her breathing shift, short, shallow, preparing for her cue. She was walking toward the kitchen. The show was about to begin. I placed my glass on the counter and waited. Let her bring the storm. I was ready to rebuild from the wreckage. She entered like an actress stepping onto a stage. Every part of her, from the set of her shoulders to the way she smoothed her blouse as she walked, screamed preparation. Claire had always been beautiful, even in the quiet way that didn't ask for attention. But tonight, she was composed in a way that wasn't natural. Sculpted, almost. Hardened. I didn't turn to face her immediately. I let her come to me. She paused at the kitchen threshold, her presence brushing against my back like static. When she spoke, Her voice was perfectly calibrated, calm, even, and intentionally soft. But the polish was too obvious. It didn't feel like her. It felt like someone playing her. "Ethan, can we talk?" I turned, slowly. Didn't speak. Just met her eyes. Behind her, through the doorway, I saw them. The trio perched and waiting, watching. Jason sat forward now, elbows on knees like he was waiting for the kickoff. Melissa and Tamron held their wine glasses tighter, as if they knew this was it, the part of the show where the poor husband gets blindsided and pleads. I could almost hear the unspoken script humming in their heads. Claire took one step in, her hands clasped in front of her like she was at a podium. It isn't working anymore," she began. I nodded once. "Go on." That seemed to surprise her. Maybe she'd expected me to interrupt, to protest, to laugh in denial. Her brow furrowed, only slightly, and then she steadied. "I need to choose myself," she said, her voice too clear, like someone reading from a page. "I've spent so much of my life trying to be the version of me that fits your world. The architect's wife, the dinner party hostess, the one who always says, 'I'm fine' when I wasn't." I could feel Jason lean in further in the living room. Tamron whispered something to Melissa, and they all turned their attention more sharply toward the kitchen. This was the moment they'd prepped her for. Claire delivering the liberation speech. Me collapsing. "Ethan," she continued, her voice tightening just enough to sound sincere. "I know this is hard to hear. I know you'll have questions, but I've made my decision, and I hope you'll respect that." I didn't speak right away. I let the silence sit between us like a pane of glass. Finally, I asked, "What exactly isn't working?" Claire blinked. It wasn't a confrontational question. I kept my tone even. Curious. That threw her. "I just told you," she replied, more quickly this time. "We've grown apart. I don't feel seen anymore." "Okay," I said. "Can you be more specific?" Behind her, Tamron crossed her legs and leaned back like she was watching an actor forget their lines. Jason scratched the back of his neck. No one laughed this time. Claire drew a breath. "You don't make time for us. You're always working. And when you are here, it's like you're not with me." That one stung a little, but I didn't flinch. "Have you told me that before?" I asked. She hesitated. "Not in those words. But you rehearsed those ones," I said, gesturing subtly behind her. With them, her eyes widened for a split second, then narrowed. "This isn't some conspiracy, Ethan," she snapped. I needed support. I needed to say this with strength. "Which you found," I said calmly, "in the middle of the living room, with a full audience." She stepped forward, her voice growing sharper. "Don't do this. Don't try to turn this around on me like I've somehow done something wrong by choosing to be honest." "I'm not turning anything," I said. "You came here with a performance. I'm just asking for the truth underneath it." She faltered, just slightly. I walked past her and looked into the living room. Jason avoided my gaze. Tamron took a quick sip of her wine, while Melissa stared straight ahead like she didn't want to be a part of this anymore. "You all came here to watch me break," I said to them, my voice still low, still steady. "Did you think I'd cry? That I'd beg her to stay? That I'd call you names, throw something, storm out so Claire could feel like the bigger person?" Nobody answered. Claire turned back to them, her posture suddenly unsure. "I'm not going to do any of that," I said. "Because if she's decided this marriage is over, then she doesn't need my permission to leave it." The room's energy shifted. Not a big change, just a crack in the confidence they all came in with. The certainty that Claire was the victim and I was the villain. Claire's voice came again, lower now, trying to hold on to control. "I didn't want to hurt you, Ethan. But you needed an audience?" I asked. She looked down, and for a moment, just a flicker, she looked scared. Not of me, of how easily I was holding it together. "Do you want me to leave?" I asked her. She shook her head. "No, that's not. I thought maybe we could talk, just the two of us, after." "After the scene?" I asked. "After you take your bow?" Claire went silent, and so did the room. I looked at her again, not with hatred, not with pity, just with the quiet knowing of a man who saw the wreckage before the storm hit and braced accordingly. "If you've already decided," I said, "then I won't argue." And just like that, I saw the script unravel. Silence. Not the kind that feels peaceful. The kind that weighs down a room like humidity, thick, pressing against your skin, making it hard to breathe. Claire was still standing a few feet away from me, her posture beginning to collapse under the weight of her unraveling plan. I could see the cracks forming in real time, her fingers twitching slightly, her gaze darting toward the living room, hoping for backup. But none came. Tamron was now glancing nervously between us, as if she'd missed a cue. Melissa had gone quiet, sipping what little was left of her wine, her lips pressed so tight the lipstick had smudged into the corner of her mouth. Jason wasn't even pretending anymore. He stared down at the rug, jaw clenched, refusing to meet anyone's eyes, especially mine. I leaned against the counter, my arms folded loosely. Calm, unmoving. You set the time, I said evenly. You set the place. You even brought an audience, because you expected me to beg. Claire opened her mouth, closed it. There was a tremor in her lips now, just enough to betray the mask of control she'd worn when she walked in. You've been rehearsing this, I continued. Practicing the right tone, memorizing the right phrases. Phrases like, I need to choose myself, and he'll understand eventually. But it wasn't supposed to go like this, was it? She started, but I didn't let her finish. You expected me to unravel, to plead, maybe even shout. You wanted confirmation that you were doing the right thing by walking away, that I was somehow the one holding you back. Claire's eyes flicked again to her friends, as if to say something, save this, remind me I'm right. But they stayed silent. I pushed off the counter and took a single step forward. Not aggressive, not threatening, just enough to be heard a little clearer. I won't give you that, I said, my voice like steel wrapped in velvet. If you want this to be over, it's over. But don't pretend it's bravery. Don't call it growth. Her arms dropped to her sides, shoulders sagging an inch. The confidence that had filled the room an hour ago, the intoxicating high of collective justification, was dissipating like cheap perfume. I didn't expect it to be easy, she said, her voice finally cracking. I knew you'd be hurt. Funny, I said, nodding slightly. You planned everything except how I'd react if I didn't fall apart. Jason finally looked up, eyes meeting mine for the first time. His expression was different now. Not smug, not superior, guilty, but he still said nothing. Claire turned, now facing them, almost pleading. Can we talk privately? She asked. This doesn't have to be a group discussion. I tilted my head. That's rich, considering you made it one. No one laughed. Not even a breath of amusement. Claire turned back to me, flustered now, her voice rising slightly. This is still my life, Ethan. I have a right to speak my truth. You do, I agreed. But don't confuse truth with performance. They're not the same. Tamron stood, adjusting her jacket like she couldn't wait to leave. Maybe we should give you two some space, she muttered. No, I said quickly, stopping her. Stay. Claire looked at me, confused. You all came here to witness something, didn't you? I asked. A man fall apart. A wife find her voice. The beginning of her freedom. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Well, here it is, I said. Claire gets what she wanted. I won't fight her, but you all should see exactly what that costs. Claire stiffened, finally letting the weight of her own design settle on her. I could see it, the realization that the outcome didn't feel as satisfying without the emotional fireworks. That my silence, my steadiness, wasn't weakness. It was power, because she didn't break me, and that's what scared her. Jason stood now too, avoiding my gaze, walking toward the front door like a man fleeing a crime scene. I should go, he mumbled. Melissa and Tamron followed without a word. No hugs, no last glances, just the shuffle of shoes and the quiet thud of a door closing behind them. Suddenly, it was just the two of us. Claire stared at the empty doorway, shoulders rising and falling with a shallow breath. Then she turned back to me, and for the first time that night, I saw something real in her eyes, panic. Not over me, over the fact that she'd lost control. I didn't want it to be like this, she whispered. I know, I said. She stepped closer. You're not even going to ask me why. No. Why not? Because I already know. Her eyes watered, not from sadness, but frustration. You're acting like I'm the villain. I tilted my head. You brought an audience to end our marriage like it was a one-act play. You rehearsed your lines. You expected applause. That's not villainy, Claire. That's cowardice dressed up as clarity. She opened her mouth, searching for a retort, but nothing came out. I turned and walked toward the hall, toward the bedroom that now felt like a museum exhibit, curated, untouched, but no longer sacred. Behind me, Claire stood alone in the kitchen, framed by the same recessed lights we once installed together during a winter remodel. She looked small now, not like the woman who entered with a speech, but like the woman left behind by her own decisions. And me? I didn't feel like I'd lost anything. I felt like I'd just stepped out of a fog. For a long moment, the house stood still. Claire lingered in the kitchen, her shoulders still tense, as though bracing for some second wave that never came. I didn't offer her comfort. I didn't offer a lecture either. What I had to say next didn't belong in a shouting match. It wasn't meant to break her. It was just the truth. I returned to the kitchen, calm, deliberate. My glass of water sat untouched on the counter where I'd left it. I picked it up, took a sip, and then set it back down with quiet finality. Claire turned slowly, arms folded over her chest now, defensive. "So that's it?" she asked. "You're just done?" I nodded. "I think I have been for a while. I just didn't say it out loud." Her eyes narrowed, the sharpness coming back into her voice. "You didn't fight for me." "No," I said. "And I won't." She looked wounded by that, but I could see the confusion beneath it. Maybe she expected relief, like her plan had worked. But now that she stood in the silence left behind, she wasn't ready for how empty it felt. And that's when I gave her what she didn't see coming. I met someone. Her head snapped up like I'd struck her. "Not in the way you're thinking," I said quickly, my voice calm, measured. I didn't cross any lines. Not physically, not emotionally, but she reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. Claire stared at me, blinking fast. "Her name's Camilla," I continued. "She's a designer. We worked on a joint project a few months ago. She's married, happily, as far as I can tell. Our conversations were always professional. But," I paused, "not for effect, for breath." She treated me like I mattered, like my ideas were worth hearing, like I was visible. I didn't pursue anything. I wouldn't, not while I was still in this. But I started looking forward to our meetings, not because I wanted her, but because I remembered how it felt to be respected. Claire's lips parted slightly, her face pale. "So you're blaming me for that?" I shook my head. "No, I'm thanking you." That stopped her cold. "Because tonight," I said, "you gave me clarity. You said it's over. And that means I don't have to pretend anymore. I don't have to keep trying to hold together something that's already cracked beyond repair." Claire moved toward the sink, her hands trembling now as she gripped the edge of the counter. "You're just standing there, telling me you had some emotional affair like it's noble?" "No," I replied. "I'm telling you that I felt something I hadn't felt in years. And I didn't act on it. That's what matters." She laughed once, bitter and sharp. "You're so full of yourself. You think just because you didn't sleep with her, you get to play the hero in all this?" I looked at her, really looked, and saw it. Not just anger, not just pain, jealousy. "You made your choice tonight," I said. "You brought your friends. You brought Jason. You delivered your speech. And you expected me to fall apart. But when I didn't, that's what really bothers you, isn't it?" Her face twisted. "Don't flatter yourself." "I'm not," I said. "I just finally stopped flattering you." She turned away, wiping her hands down the front of her blouse as if trying to regain control. "I gave you everything," she muttered. "I stayed through your late nights, your obsession with work, your silence at dinner. I gave up opportunities to support your career." I nodded slowly. "And I never asked you to. That's the problem. You made sacrifices, and instead of telling me what you needed in return, you collected resentment like receipts. Until tonight." Claire's voice dropped. "What? So you're perfect now? You get to walk away clean because you didn't cheat first?" "No," I said, "but I'm walking away honest." And then I added, "Something you weren't." Claire turned sharply. "What's that supposed to mean? You think I didn't know about Jason?" I asked, eyes fixed on hers. She froze. I noticed the long hugs, the way your voice softened when you said his name, the wine nights that ended later and later. I didn't need to check your phone to know what was happening. Claire's face flushed crimson. Her jaw opened, then shut again. "You think I'm stupid?" I asked. "That I didn't know he'd be here tonight for a reason?" She began, then faltered. "Don't bother," I said. "You made it obvious. You didn't come to break things cleanly. You came to make yourself the victim in front of an audience." She looked at me, her expression hollow now. "No fight, just fatigue." "I didn't plan for it to go this way," she said softly. "I know," I replied. And for the first time, I believed her. Because this wasn't power. This wasn't triumph. This was a woman watching the narrative slip from her hands. I walked past her and headed toward the hall. "You don't get to rewrite this," I said over my shoulder. You wanted the freedom to walk away? You have it. And then I stopped at the edge of the stairs, turned, and looked back at her one last time. And now so do I. Claire didn't move for several seconds. She stood at the edge of the kitchen like a statue that had just cracked under the pressure of too much silence. The chill in the room wasn't from the temperature. It was from the shift in gravity. All the power she thought she held had evaporated the second I stopped playing my role in her little stage production. Her eyes tracked me as I walked toward the stairs, slow and methodical. I wasn't packing. I wasn't storming off. I was just leaving the room, taking back my space. That's when her voice broke. Don't you dare act untouchable. I stopped, just short of the first step. Ethan, she said again, louder this time. Don't you dare stand there acting like you're some saint. I turned to face her, and what I saw in her expression wasn't pain, it was fury. Desperation, even. Like she'd gambled everything on tonight and was watching the pot slide across the table into someone else's hands. You want the truth? She snapped. Fine. You want it real? You got it. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I've been with Jason, she said, each word sharp as glass. For months. Behind your back. While you were out building your beautiful little empire. While you were off playing Mr. Architect of the Year and barely looking at me. There it was. The drop. The final nail. I fucked him, she said, daring me to flinch. I chose to. More than once. We didn't fall into it. We didn't get carried away. I wanted him. Her voice cracked just slightly at the edge of the last word, but she didn't stop. Because he saw me. He touched me like I mattered. He made me feel like I still had a pulse. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thunder. Tamron and Melissa, who had been halfway out the door, froze. Jason, who had already slipped out a few minutes ago like a coward avoiding cleanup, was gone. Gone when she needed him most. Fitting. I didn't say a word. Just watched her. You don't get to stand there like you're better than me, she said again, the rage unraveling into something closer to a plea. You're not. You were emotionally absent for years. You buried yourself in blueprints and deadlines and forgot I was even here. I was lonely. I was drowning. I nodded once. Just once. Thank you, I said. Her eyebrows pulled together, confused. What? Thank you, I repeated, voice calm. For finally saying it out loud. The weight of it all seemed to hit her at once. Claire's posture collapsed as if something heavy had been pried out of her hands, something she thought she needed to hold onto forever. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she expected an explosion from me. Maybe a slam of a door. Maybe a shattered glass. Anything to break the unbearable stillness. But I gave her none of it. Instead, I stepped toward the living room. Past the kitchen. Past her. You're not angry? She asked. Her voice sounded smaller now. Not defiant. Not empowered. Just lost. I said. Weeks ago. Maybe even months. Before I admitted to myself that this wasn't a marriage anymore. Before I realized I'd already let go. She swallowed hard. You knew about him? I didn't need to see you two together to know. You had the same look you used to have when we first met, just not with me. The way you smiled when you got texts. The way you started hiding your phone screen. I knew. Claire pressed her back against the wall, as if it could hold her up. I turned toward the open door, where Tamron and Melissa now looked pale, stunned. Neither of them met my eyes. You two can go, I said to them. Show's over. Tamron mumbled something like, I'm sorry, before she slipped out. Melissa followed, silent. Now it was just the two of us again. Claire dropped into one of the bar stools, her hand shaking as it reached for the edge of the counter. I thought I wanted this to be easy. That if I was honest, if I said it all, maybe you'd scream. Maybe you'd hate me. That would have made it easier. I don't hate you, Claire, I said, walking to the entryway. But I also don't need to save you from your choices. She looked up then, tears forming in her eyes, but she wasn't crying yet. Not the real kind. These weren't tears of grief. They were tears of being unmasked. You don't even want to know why it started? No, I said. Because I already know. She waited for me to explain. And I did. Because you were never going to ask for what you needed. You were just going to expect me to guess. And when I didn't, you'd punish me for it. Quietly, in pieces. You didn't want a partner, Claire. You wanted a mirror. One that reflected back the version of you that made sense at the time. She covered her face with her hands. Not crying. Just hiding. And for the first time, I didn't want to fix it. I didn't want to hold her. I didn't want to chase the reasons or untangle the mess. I just wanted to leave it. You don't have to move out tonight, I said. I will. I already have a place. Her head snapped up again. You what? I saw this coming. Maybe not tonight exactly, but eventually. So I found an apartment last month. I've already signed the lease. I'll be out by tomorrow. The final silence landed between us like a door slowly closing. Ethan, she whispered. But I didn't wait for whatever was coming next. I turned, walked upstairs, and began gathering my life back, piece by piece. On my terms now. The house sounded hollow after the door closed behind Melissa and Tamron. Even though they'd barely said a word during Claire's confession, their presence had clung to the room like cigarette smoke, lingering, invasive, impossible to ignore. Now that they were gone, the silence felt different. Not peaceful, just stripped. I was halfway up the stairs when I heard Claire's voice again, softer this time. Ethan, can we talk for a minute? I didn't stop moving, but I answered her anyway. We've been talking. You just didn't expect me to listen this way. I reached the bedroom and flicked on the light. The soft white glow cast familiar shapes. Our bed, the framed photo from our 10th anniversary trip to Florence, the arm where she insisted on refinishing together. Suddenly, it all looked like someone else's life. Like a set I'd wandered onto by accident. I pulled my suitcase from the back of the closet, the wheels creaking faintly as they rolled across the hardwood. Behind me, I heard her footsteps, tentative and slow, stopping at the doorway. You're really leaving tonight? Yes. That was fast. No, I said without turning. It's just been a long time coming. She stepped inside, arms folded tightly across her chest, like she was trying to shrink herself into something I might still recognize. Her voice dropped, gentle now. The storm had passed. This was the wreckage part. I gave you my best years, she said. I gave you mine too, I replied. That silenced her. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the low hum of the air conditioning kicking on. She tried again. Do you really think it's over? Just like that? I turned, holding her gaze. You don't get to ask that now, Claire. Not after tonight. You had your story. You even rehearsed it. And when it didn't go the way you expected, now you're looking for a rewrite. She stopped, exhaling sharply. I don't want to lose everything in one night. You didn't, I said. You lost it over months. Maybe years. Tonight's just when the curtain dropped. Her lip trembled slightly, and she stepped closer. Ethan, we don't have to end it like this. I almost laughed. Like this? As if this was sudden. As if the confession of a months-long affair was a minor hiccup we could gloss over with some midnight soul-searching and tears. What did you think would happen tonight? I asked. Honestly, she hesitated. That hesitation said everything. I don't know, she finally said. Maybe that you'd be angry, that you'd scream, that we'd have it out, and then, maybe figure it out together. You cheated on me, I said plainly, repeatedly, with someone I knew. And you planned tonight, down to the wine, the lines, the audience. I didn't want to be alone when I said it, she said, her voice starting to tremble. But you wanted me to be, I said. That's the part you don't want to admit. You wanted the validation. You wanted your friends to see how strong you were, how noble. You didn't want a private, painful conversation. You wanted a victory lap. She sat on the edge of the bed, her shoulders caving in. I just felt so forgotten, Ethan. I nodded. You could have told me that. I tried. No, I said gently. You punished me for it. That's different. She didn't respond. I knelt by the dresser, pulled out only what I needed. 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, my running shoes, my father's watch. The rest would stay. I didn't need to erase myself. Just disengage. Claire watched me, eyes glossy but not yet crying. She was still trying to find the right move, the next card to play. What came next wasn't rage, and it wasn't apology. It was seduction. Her voice dropped, low and intimate now. You remember our anniversary in Chicago? The hotel room with the balcony? You barely left the bed that weekend. I didn't respond. She stood slowly, walked over, and touched my arm. We were us then. I let her hand rest there a moment, then gently pulled away. That's not who we are now, I said. She looked down, embarrassed. I still love you, she whispered. Then you should have protected us, I replied. That landed. She stepped back like the words had pushed her. Claire tried one more time. One last tactic. I don't want to go to bed alone tonight, she said. I'm not staying, I replied. She blinked. Where are you going? I told you. I have a place. She swallowed. I didn't think you'd be so cold. I'm not cold, Claire. I'm just done. The phrase settled over us like the final line of a play. I zipped the suitcase, picked up my laptop bag, and walked past her. At the top of the stairs, I paused, then turned to look at her one last time. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said. But don't come looking for it in me. She didn't follow me, didn't call out, didn't beg. I walked out into the night, into the cool September air, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was walking toward something. Something honest. Something mine. The downtown apartment smelled like fresh paint and unburned air. Sterile. Empty in the way new places always are, like the space doesn't quite know you exist yet. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me with a quiet click. No welcome mat. No familiar echo of Claire's keys hitting the bowl by the door. Just silence. And it was beautiful. The place was small, intentionally. A one-bedroom loft with industrial touches, steel fixtures, and big west-facing windows. The kind of space I'd admired in design magazines, but never thought I'd actually live in. Claire always preferred charm. Crown molding, soft rugs, antique doorknobs. But this was clean, sharp, minimal. This was mine. I dropped my suitcase by the door and set my laptop bag on the countertop. The kitchen was still untouched, cabinet doors squeaky from new hinges, not a single dish in the drawers. I hadn't even stocked the fridge yet. That would come tomorrow. Tonight, all I had was a folding chair, a mattress still wrapped in plastic, and a bottle of water from the drive. But for the first time in years, I wasn't overwhelmed by what was missing. I was energized by the space to rebuild. I sat at the bare kitchen island and pulled out my notebook. The same one I'd used on-site for client sketches. On the first clean page, I wrote 2 words at the top. Immediate. Then underneath it, forward all mail. Call the attorney. Remove myself from joint accounts. Cancel the anniversary reservation. Change the locks on the studio. Email HR about emergency contacts. Update my insurance policies. Clean. Mechanical. Necessary. I flipped the page. After. Buy a real bed. Find a desk that doesn't wobble. Pick up groceries for a full week. Plant something by the window. Frame a photo of mom and dad. Find a new go-to coffee shop. Sketch something just for me. These weren't just tasks. They were declarations. Promises to myself. I looked at that last one again. Sketch something just for me. It had been a long time since I did that. Everything I drew for the past few years had been under deadlines, for clients, for permits, for Claire's approval. Even the personal projects. Our vacation cabin that never happened, the lake house floor plan she said was too remote, had felt like I was designing someone else's dream. Tonight, for the first time in a long time, I had the freedom to imagine my own. The mattress wasn't comfortable, but I lay on it anyway. No sheets. Just the plastic crinkling beneath me as I stared at the ceiling, feeling every breath in my chest. I wasn't sad. I thought I would be. But what I felt was clarity. The kind that only comes when something breaks so completely you can finally see the fault lines that were always there. Claire and I had been unraveling long before Jason. Long before the late nights, the missed dinners, the cold silences that passed for routine. We'd become polite strangers, roommates with history, but no future. And I'd been too damn tired, too distracted, or too cowardly to admit it. She'd made the break messy, loud, public. But the real separation had already begun in the quiet. When I stopped reaching for her in the morning, when she stopped laughing at my jokes, when our texts became calendars instead of conversations. This place, this night, this notebook on the counter, it was all a line in the sand. Tomorrow, I'd go back to work. I'd sit in a boardroom, pitch ideas, mark up blueprints. I'd make small talk with engineers and answer emails like nothing had changed. But everything had. Because I had. And the best part? No one needed to understand it but me. I didn't know Claire closure. I didn't need her to regret anything. I didn't want a post-mortem on the affair or some late-night message about missing the way I made her feel safe. I wasn't interested in rehashing a version of us that only ever worked when we were pretending. I wanted real, raw edges, messy learning, new routines that weren't built around compromise but around intention, around self-respect. The next morning, I woke before the alarm, sunlight cutting through the big windows, bouncing off bare walls and unfinished floors. It felt like a beginning. No coffee yet, no music, No toast popping up from a chrome toaster. Just me. And for once, that was enough. By Monday morning, I was no longer reacting. I was executing. My life, once entangled in shared calendars, subtle negotiations, and silent disappointments, had become a checklist. And I was crossing things off one by one. The first email I sent that day was to my attorney, Lauren Kincaid. We'd worked together once before, years ago, when a client tried to stiff my firm on a major invoice. She was sharp, methodical, and she didn't tolerate emotional detours. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted results. She replied within 2 hours. I'll draft a clean proposal for separation of assets, but I need full financials. The more direct we are, the faster we can move. Perfect. I gathered every statement, every shared login, every insurance policy, and compiled it into a drive folder. Mortgage, credit cards, car titles. I kept it all neat. No notes, no passive-aggressive annotations. Just facts. When I shared the link, I included a single line in the email. Let's keep it clean. No gray areas. Claire didn't respond to the official notice right away. But 2 nights later, I got a text at 10:37 p.m. Do we really need lawyers involved? Can't we handle this like adults? I stared at it for a moment. The irony of that line, coming from the woman who paraded our breakup in front of an audience, would have been laughable if it weren't so sad. I didn't reply. The next morning, she followed up with a longer message. Something about keeping things civil and not making this harder than it needs to be. But what she really meant was, she wanted control again, and I wasn't giving it back. Lauren sent over the first draft of the separation agreement that Friday. Straightforward. Equal division. No alimony. Each of us keeps our respective retirement accounts. The house goes up for sale within 90 days, profits split. No loopholes. No barbs. Just clean math. Claire responded through her own lawyer a week later. Apparently, she wanted to keep the house. I'll buy you out, she said when we finally met in person to sign the initial documents. We were sitting across from each other in a small conference room downtown. Her blouse was carefully chosen, navy blue, understated, like she wanted to project calm capability. I knew that look. It was her corporate facade, the one she rarely used at home. You can't afford it, I said without judgment. Not without Jason. And he's gone. Her jaw tightened. That was the other fracture starting to show. Jason had disappeared from her life entirely. From what I gathered, he'd backed away the moment things got real. Once the drama turned into responsibility. No more wine-soaked nights behind my back. No more sneaking around. Just accountability. He wasn't built for that. Claire tried to pretend it didn't matter, but it showed. In the dark circles under her eyes. In the way her voice occasionally trembled when we discussed logistics. In how often she mentioned friendship like it was some sort of consolation prize. At one point, she looked at me across the table and said, I still want us to be part of each other's lives. I leaned back in my chair. Why? She blinked. Because we mattered. Because 18 years don't just disappear. I nodded. You're right. They don't. But that doesn't mean we should carry the wreckage into what's next. That shut her down. Not with anger, but with finality. The papers moved forward quickly after that. By the end of the second week, we had a timeline for the house listing. She'd be staying there alone in the meantime, and I'd signed over temporary possession until the sale. I didn't want to walk through those halls again anyway. Claire's friends, the ones who cheered her on the night of our collapse, started fading like old wallpaper. Tamron unfollowed me on Instagram. Melissa removed Claire's birthday post and replaced it with a quote about authenticity. Subtle, but telling. I wasn't the only one who saw through the performance. Turns out, when the script doesn't deliver a standing ovation, people walk out of the theater. Even Claire's sister texted me privately one night. I don't know what really happened, but you seem lighter. I hope you're okay. I didn't respond. Not because I was bitter, but because I didn't need a chorus anymore. My story was no longer up for debate. Every day, I added something new to my routines. A quiet breakfast with no phone. Morning runs that left my legs aching in the best way. Sketches done just for me. Rough, experimental, sometimes unfinished. But mine. I also stopped sleeping with my phone next to the bed. That small shift made a big difference. No midnight texts. No temptations to scroll through the past. One night, I got a message from Claire. I miss us. Another time. I made a mistake. I stared at both texts for exactly 10 seconds each before deleting them. Not out of cruelty. Out of respect for myself. Claire was no longer the villain in my story. She was just someone I used to love, who made decisions I could no longer ignore. And I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done living in the gray. I stopped referring to the apartment as temporary around week 4. Something changed in me once the dust settled from the paperwork, the texts, the property division, and the silence that followed. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building. Not for someone else. Not for an idea of a future tied to partnership or obligation. But for me. The first piece of furniture I bought was a desk. A real one. Solid oak, black metal legs, clean lines. It was heavier than I expected, and I wrestled it up the stairs myself, refusing to call anyone for help. I set it near the big window, right where the afternoon light pooled onto the floor around 3 p.m. and left it bare except for a sketch pad and a single pen. Every morning, before email, before work, before anything, I'd sit and sketch. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There were rules now. No calls after 9. 1 creative project per week. 3 runs per week, minimum. No alcohol in the house. Not yet. And no texting Claire. Ever. At first, I expected loneliness to creep in. It didn't. What came instead was space. Mental. Emotional. Spatial. I started cooking again. Simple things. Grilled salmon. Roasted vegetables. I forgot how satisfying it was to season something just right. To eat at a clean counter in silence without filling it with TV or music or someone else's complaints about the day. The apartment didn't echo anymore. It felt quiet. The kind of quiet I used to mistake for emptiness. Now I saw it for what it was, clarity. Claire still texted sometimes. Not often. Always at night. Always short. I miss talking to you. I heard your firm landed the Fairfax contract. Congrats. Do you ever think about us? I never replied. Not because I was punishing her, but because I no longer wanted what she was offering. We'd made our choices. She with her betrayal. Me with my boundaries. That was the thing I'd come to understand. Respect isn't something you request. It's a wall you build. If people can't scale it, they don't belong inside. Jason disappeared completely. Not just from Claire's life, but from the neighborhood, the friend circle, the local gym. Vanished. Apparently, betrayal isn't as sexy once it has consequences. Claire tried to hint, once, that she'd been used. That she should have known better. But I didn't offer her comfort. I wasn't her soft place to land anymore. I was the man who finally stopped bending. I started filling the apartment with pieces that felt like me. A tall shelf for my travel books. A faded print of the Chicago skyline. A clock I'd always admired in the corner of a client's loft. Nothing extravagant. Just deliberate. And that was the point. Everything I kept now had to pass through a filter. Does this serve me? Or does this pull me backward? That went for people too. I turned down a few social invites at first. Not because I was isolating, but because I wasn't ready to wear the mask. The divorced guy narrative bored me. I didn't want to retell the story or hear others dance around it awkwardly. I didn't want pity drinks or half-joking offers to get me back out there. I didn't need back out there. I needed here. Eventually, I rejoined the world on my own terms. A colleague invited me to a Saturday morning coffee meetup with a few local designers. I went, brought a sketchpad, talked shop, laughed for the first time in what felt like months without the laugh catching in my throat. I got home that afternoon and realized I hadn't thought about Claire once. Not once. That night, I lit a single candle in the kitchen while I cooked. Not for romance. Just because the light felt warm and earned. I plated my food, poured a glass of water, and sat at the table. No TV, no noise. Just the soft flicker of the candle and the satisfaction of eating something I made with my own hands, in a space I chose, surrounded by no one but myself. And I liked it. I liked being alone. Not because I hated relationships, but because I'd found something better than codependency. Self-reliance. I no longer feared being forgotten. I no longer needed to be forgiven. All I needed was what I was finally giving myself. Attention, intention, and the permission to be whole. Without applause, without anyone else's timeline. And that, to me, felt like the real win. The invitation came in a plain white envelope, hand-addressed in thick black ink. At first, I assumed it was another legal document. Maybe the finalized deed transfer on the house Claire insisted on keeping, or something from the accountant. But when I opened it, I found a letterpress card with a clean serif font. Gallery opening, September 23rd, Hayes and Weller Collective. Below it, a handwritten note from a client of mine. You helped us bring our vision to life. Come see it in full color. R.M. I almost didn't go. Not because I wasn't proud. I was. The renovation had been one of my most creatively satisfying projects in the past few years. But the idea of walking into a social space again, wearing a blazer, shaking hands, being Ethan Walker the architect, again, felt strange. Still, I went. The gallery was tucked into an old converted textile warehouse. Red brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed beams that reminded me of my first studio. Inside, the space had been transformed. Every corner bathed in soft lighting, sculpture, and modern canvases sharing space with repurposed industrial details. It looked beautiful, but more than that, it felt intended. I drifted through the first few exhibits, nodding at familiar faces, sipping from a glass of sparkling water, no longer feeling the pressure to prove I was okay. I was okay, and I wasn't performing. That's when I met her. She was standing in front of a large piece made from reclaimed concrete and bronze piping. Unusual, stark, beautiful in its contrast. Looks like a foundation breaking itself open, I said, more to myself than to her. She turned slightly. Brown eyes. Soft, curious. That's exactly how I described it to the artist. You must be Ethan. I blinked. You know who I am? I'm Olivia Hayes, she said, extending a hand. Co-curator. And I know your work. Your name's on half the walls here. We shook hands. Her grip was confident. Warm. You helped reimagine this space, she said. Everyone keeps pointing to that staircase and saying, Ethan nailed the proportions. I smiled, a little surprised by how easily I did. It's rare that a staircase gets compliments at an art show. Well, it deserves them. Most people just design a way to get from A to B. You designed a reason to pause in between. That line hit me harder than she probably meant it to, because that's exactly what this part of my life had become, a long, necessary pause between A and B, between who I was and who I was becoming. We talked, for longer than I expected, about architecture, art, the struggle of managing creative people, the tension between planning and inspiration, and somewhere between the second and third exhibit, it no longer felt like networking. It felt like two people sharing air. There was no flirtation. Not yet. Just attention. Deliberate, thoughtful attention. She asked questions that made me think and didn't seem to be filling silences with noise. I realized, at one point, that she hadn't looked at her phone once. When I mentioned that, she laughed. I get one night a week where I'm not allowed to perform. This is it. I raised an eyebrow. And this doesn't count as performing? She smiled. Only if you're pretending. I wasn't. Later, when most of the crowd had thinned and someone began closing off one wing of the exhibit, she walked me to the front. We paused near the entrance, near the same raw brick wall that had been part of the original structure. I hope tonight felt like more than a formality, she said. It did. There was a pause. Not awkward. Just present. And I realized I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel like I had to charm her, or impress her, or edit myself. I just felt steady. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. You wear solitude like someone who's worked for it. Like someone who had to earn peace the hard way. I looked at her, surprised by the precision of that observation. I did, I said. And? She asked gently. Now I protect it. But I'm not afraid to share it, with the right person. She smiled, not asking if I meant her. She didn't have to. She reached into her bag and handed me a small card. On the back, a handwritten note. A coffee shop with uneven tables and good light. Saturdays, 9:30. No expectations. I took it, and I knew, as I slipped it into my pocket, that this wasn't the start of a love story. It was the continuation of my story, with possibility attached. That night, back in my apartment, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my email. I just sat at my desk, opened my sketchbook, and drew without thinking, without purpose. And when I looked down at the page, I saw something new. A concept for a space I didn't even know I'd been dreaming of, open, grounded, full of light. A place you could bring someone into and still feel like yourself. Claire hadn't broken me. She'd just been the ending of a story I'd held onto too tightly. And Olivia? She wasn't the next chapter. She was just the first moment in a new one I wasn't afraid to write. On my terms.